Welcome to the Dork Forest. Jackie and her pals will never bore us. Shameless confessions
about our obsession
will make us laugh and smile. So let's explore the Dork Forest and dork out for a while.
Hi, Jackie Kashian here. You're listening to The Dork Forest. You know the websites, dorkforest.com, thedorkforest.com if you like a determiner. JackieKashian.com has everything. Both of my podcasts, all of the stand-up stuff, the new album, links to YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all the things. But so, I think, does dorkforest.com, where you can look at old videos of different shows. Anyway, if you want to support the show, tell people about the show, review it on iTunes, thumbs it up on Pandora or Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. I appreciate that. You can donate. You can donate monthly. PayPal lets you do that. You can also do my Venmo if you like. It's at Jackie Kashian, absolutely everywhere. And my email address is jackie@jackiekashian.com, and that's what the PayPal is. The PayPal link is on jackiekashian.com and dorkforest.com. And go to any of them. Thanks for listening. There's merch. There's stand-up, there's tour guide, you can find out where I'm touring. This is getting long, so let's get into the show. Hello and welcome to the show, Darla Kashian. Orchestras, what are we doing these days? How are you pronouncing our last name?
Kashian, always Kashian.
All right, Kashian.
Unless I'm in a coffee shop in Denver, and then somebody says, "You sound very familiar."
Hi, Darla. Rangers, it's my sister. She's back to do another Dork Forest, because I can't believe we never did a Dork Forest. That trombone episode of the Dork Forest made me go, why the hell did we never do chamber orchestras or orchestras at all? Because you enjoy... Okay. Can you hear that I'm at a Phil's in San Francisco, possibly? Maybe not. Can you hear?
Yeah.
Okay, but you don't hear the background where they're knocking out?
I do. I hear the pounding.
Well,
we'll look at it's the percussion section of the podcast.
Right. There's ambiance, you guys. This is a
That's
beautiful
right.
ambiance. So here we go. I am recording. Let us begin with what instruments do you currently play? Do you say... Could you read music? Were you handed a thing?
I was thinking about that the other day when I dropped one of the kids off at a friend's and there was a trombone sitting there. And I thought, were it not for COVID, I would have asked if I could play the trombone.
Right. Oh, right.
My arms aren't long enough, but like in theory, could I? So what do I currently play?
Yeah.
I occasionally play a viola.
Okay.
I often play an electric guitar.
Often,
because I have one in my home office, and when I become frustrated with the world,
do you noodle around on an electric guitar?
I do.
You don't play that Stairway to Heaven, do you?
I wish I could. But in theory, yes.
Right. If you had the music, I suppose.
Yeah. Mostly, what I do is I play music I like. This is going to sound very familiar to our childhood. I play along with the radio. So,
okay.
It's like an ear tuning exercise. So,
fun.
Yes.
I didn't know you were still doing that. That's awesome.
It's my favorite. I actually love it. We have a piano, so occasionally I play the piano.
Okay.
And it was, I think, like, to me, buying a piano was a big deal in my life. So, right. And then I think that's about it right now. I really, I go through phases of like looking for a French horn.
Yeah.
Again, and I think I like my neighbors. I don't know that they deserve it. So.
Okay. So, and now let's back up. So the first instrument you learned was the violin, right?
It was the violin, yes.
And was it with Mr. Owie? Owie?
No. You know what? That was so long ago. So in fourth grade, we got to pick an instrument. And I think it was Mrs.
It wasn't the music teacher at Rawson, was it?
No.
Because
It was the orchestra director.
Where did you go to fourth grade?
I went to Rawson.
Oh, you did go to Rawson. Okay.
Yeah. So no, it wasn't the music director there, but like you picked an instrument and then you went to like some
Like
and then
Blakewood.
it was Mrs. Dixon.
Okay.
Do you remember
I
her?
never met Mrs. Dixon.
I'm sure you did.
Okay.
But anyway, she was the violin teacher when so basically like you went to these big group lessons that were like kind of a cattle call. And then once a week they came to your school and you did a group lesson with your fellow classmates, right?
Okay.
So yeah, so that's kind of how the whole thing got started. I hated it. I hated everything about it. And
right.
But I thought, well, I'm going to have to do this because I said I'm doing this.
Right.
And so instead I thought, well, if I'm going to hate it, at least I should be good at it.
Right. Well, I have to tell you that Russ just told me, and this makes sense because he's 2 years older than you are, and you're 2 years older than I am.
He's 3 years older than me.
Yeah. And so he wanted to play an instrument, and Nancy and Dad wouldn't let him. Somebody wouldn't let him because Scott and Phil had blown it off and they rented an instrument. And so he had to negotiate. He was like, well, what would be free? And so
that's why he played the flute.
Yep. That's why he played the flute. And so,
because we had one. Yeah.
But much like Russ trying to reinvent, the wheel, by the time it got to you, it was like, you have to take an instrument. And you're like, but I am not certain I wish to take an instrument.
No. I really wanted to take an instrument.
Oh, did you?
But here's the thing. So you sign up to play the violin, right? Because a bunch of like high school kids come and play. And you're like, oh, that looks cool. And no one tells you that you're about to embark on the most difficult thing you've ever decided to do.
When you're 9 or 8 or 9 years old.
Yeah. Like, so from that perspective, like I really wanted to do it. It looked cool. And it was like, they were good.
Yeah.
Little did I know. And so the funny thing about it is like, to this day, like in my work, I think I would rather hire a violinist or a golfer or somebody, like in my work, we hire a lot of like people who played big team sports, right? Hockey players, football players.
Oh, okay.
People who are part of a team, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's some merit in being part of a team. And eventually, if you get to be a good enough violinist, you get to be part of a team called an orchestra.
Right.
What it takes to get there is an incredible amount of self-discipline and focus.
Individual work, I suppose.
Well, and the willingness to fail all the time.
Huh. Okay. Right? Yeah.
So that to me was the greatest value of it, is like there is no point of perfection. That really what you're doing is you're trying to get better at something you could never be perfect at.
Wow. Okay. That makes perfect sense.
Well, and I think for you, who knows me, like it makes perfect sense as to who I am today, right?
Well, and it quite honestly, it reminds me of sales. It reminds me of stand-up. It reminds me of sales. It reminds me of everything to some extent.
Every difficult thing in life, right?
Because you continue to fail.
Right. And so, so that's what I did. And I worked hard at it and I got to be pretty good. And,
well, because here's how I remember it. Now, correct this, is that you started violin and I started viola, which I have always credited, as a mixed bag as our parents were. The fact that they were willing to sit through years of bad violin and viola is to their credit.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. Because Nancy insisted that we practice. She was like, you have to practice. And it was painful. I was terrible.
Oh, that's so interesting. I don't remember her ever making me practice. Maybe just because I did all the time.
Right. Anyway. I think you did all the time. And then when I quit viola, I distinctly remember you saying, we can quit. But by then you were good.
It's too late.
Yeah. By then you liked it. By then you had spent hours on end becoming actually proficient at it. So, and then I switched over to clarinet, and then you were like, what is that instrument? Gimme,
I could play
gimme,
that.
gimme,
Right.
gimme. And then I switched to trumpet and you were like, what? There's brass? Can I touch? Anyway, so you became good enough when, so what was the next? You're in grade school orchestra, or what was it?
Yeah. So like in my little group of kids in 5th grade, like I always love, I don't know, Randy Raminsky, if you're out there and a Dork Forest fan, I hope so, because you are a person I tell stories about all the time.
Really?
And part of the reason is he stayed in the orchestra through high school. And he was, he may have never gotten to be proficient.
But he just kept coming.
Yeah, but for whatever reason, he stuck it out. And so I give him a tremendous amount of credit for that, because I also think, like, I don't know, one of the challenges in life is how do you work hard at something you might not ever get to be great at, right?
Right.
Because there's so much emphasis on like excellence, and like I think, well, what about adequateness, right?
Hey, Bamford's doing a joke celebrating mediocrity. And
correct. Yeah, I mean, I think that's tremendous. So I think, so a couple interesting things happened. One is they separated me out of the group of other 5th graders.
Okay.
Or 6th graders. I don't remember which. And then I got a private lesson while they carried on.
Okay.
Because I was doing well and they were doing less proficiently, I guess. But here's the funny story. Then we got to junior high, 7th grade. I did not audition for the orchestra. I just showed up, and I declined the opportunity because turned out, like in the audition, then they would put you in order, right? Like,
right, like first chair, second.
Right.
Okay.
But it turned out I didn't know how to read music.
Oh.
Right.
You were like, just playing it by ear.
Yeah, I could hear it and play it, and I didn't know how to read music. So, so I actually sat with Randy Raminsky because he was last chair. I wasn't so bad that I was second last chair. And the orchestra director, so then
Mr.
like
Kadevers?
No, this was junior high, so Linda something or another.
Okay.
And so here's the weird thing about like what public schools used to be and could be again if we decided to invest, right? So again, I show up, it's public school, right? With an orchestra director who gave music lessons, right? So I show up, I don't audition, I end up in the orchestra, I go for my first lesson, and she's like, well, you can play the violin. Well, yes, I can. But then she figured out I didn't know how to read music.
Right.
So then I learned to read music, and much
get this. In high school, you noticed that I didn't know how to read music.
Correct.
And explained to me how to read music. And that's how I learned how to read music. So thank you very much for that. We're sisters, you guys. Anyway, so
you didn't catch on to the stereo dialogue here.
But it's great. So so she realized you didn't know how to read music.
Yeah. So then when I was like going into 8th grade, a whole bunch of like the kids in the know were auditioning for the Milwaukee Youth Symphony.
Oh.
I was not in the know. I didn't know about this. What is this thing?
Right.
But I thought, well, if they're auditioning, I should too.
You just essentially followed a small crowd of children.
Yeah. Lori Barsamian and Suya Lanjan and
a bunch of other Armenian kids.
Right. What's her name who played the cello? I apologize. Ander Hosepian.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah. So, so like, I mean, honestly, like all of you have heard stories of our parents raised by wolves, right? But someone got me down to this audition, right?
Someone did drive you.
Yes. And then Dad agreed to be part of the carpool chain. Right?
Did he?
Yes. He carpooled once a month, picked us up at high. Yeah.
This is a nice story about Elliot.
It is a nice story about Elliot. But here's the other cool thing is that he also brought us candy bars.
Oh my God.
Right. And why is that? Because Dad has a sweet tooth.
He does enjoy chocolate. He truly does. When Maria Bamford bought him a 6-month avocado of the month thing for his never say no without a number premise, at the end of it, he was like, "No more avocados, please." Anyway, candy
Fair
bars.
enough.
Yes. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, that was really, and it's funny, I just not long ago had a conversation with the new development director at the Milwaukee Symphony of like life-changing exposure to a world that otherwise I think we wouldn't have known about, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's through that like everyone went to college, everyone,
All of those people came from other kinds of families. Yeah.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but here's the funny thing. So how did I get to play the viola? So I played the violin 8th grade, 9th grade, summer, maybe the summer between 9th and 10th grade. I started playing the viola. I played in that summer orchestra that met every single day.
That's right. Yeah.
It was so crazy. It was the principal cellist for the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra. Like again, if you want to invest in young people, right? Like this orchestra was free. And it was Harry Sturm, who was the principal cellist, so the orchestra directed it. And then
he just volunteered his time?
Well, I'm sure somebody paid him, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So so it was every day from like 9 to 12. And then on Fridays, every Friday night, so it's like 6 weeks, we played an entire symphony orchestra. I mean, an entire symphony. So like Beethoven's Fifth, we played it start to finish.
Oh my gosh.
Right? And so that's all we worked on all week. And then Friday night we would do that. And then the next
perform
week,
it?
Yeah, the next week, a Tchaikovsky symphony. So I auditioned for this orchestra. This is so like the story of my life. To play the viola because I wanted to get better at playing the viola. But I didn't really know how to play the viola all that well. So I had memorized a audition piece. I could do my scales. Scales are scales. I couldn't sight read because the music was in alto clef. So I didn't know how to. But I thought, well, once I get there, right, whoever I sit with will be able to read the music, and they'll tell me, they'll teach me, right? So come to find, when I showed up the first day, that I was the only viola player.
Oh.
So Lori Colthurst, who played the bassoon, bassoon's also alto clef, taught me to read music on the way to practice every day.
Holy smokes. There you
go. So that was kind of cool. But here was the other amazing thing. Once a week, somebody from the symphony came and ran a section, right? So somebody came to work with the violins and the violas well, I was the only viola player. So guess who got like a 2-hour private lesson every week?
That'd be you, Darla. Yeah.
And then that same person played with us every Friday night so that we would have more than one viola player. So,
right.
So then that fall, when I went back to my youth orchestra, they basically were like, we're going to elevate you to the top orchestra, but only if you play the viola because they're in short supply.
Right.
And I am nothing if not an opportunist.
I remember you telling me that when we were, but I didn't hear okay, that's awesome.
Yeah. So that was cool. I mean, and
that's why you encouraged me to play the bass clarinet. You're like, you could be first bass clarinet.
Right.
Yeah.
Much more opportunities.
Yeah.
So, so I mean, that it was, but like, so the other things that came to pass around that, like, that everyone in our high school who played an instrument wanted to be in the marching band.
Right.
Right. And so
because Miss Ellie was nuts.
She was amazing.
She made the money to make it happen every summer, but she did not get paid.
Right. And it was fun.
It was so fun. It saved lives, that marching band. I swear to God, it saved so many kids' lives in South Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And when she retired, the new band director was like, no, I go away with my family in the summer. And they didn't do it. And they couldn't find the money. And so I don't think they have one right now.
That's terrible. Yeah. So I really wanted to be in marching band for football games, for
summer. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think at first, because I could play the flute, because we had a flute.
Because we had a flute.
I think I played the flute, and then she was recruiting people to play the trombone, but my little dinosaur arms not long enough to play the trombone.
Please listen to the old episode of the Dork Forest from a month ago.
Yeah, you have to be taller than 5 feet tall.
Well, and that's why that guy ended up playing the flute, the trombone, because he had the longest arms.
Right, exactly. So then same request for French horn players, right?
Okay.
And I thought, well, the French horn is perfect because it really, like in a symphony orchestra, plays a similar line oftentimes, or it plays a role as a supporting cast to a symphony orchestra.
And is it the same bass clef? Like, is it the same?
No, it's alto clef.
Is it alto clef? Okay,
yeah,
so the music is the same. Okay.
And so, and again, the other really cool thing about where we went to school is there were instruments
that you could borrow. Yeah, I got to play a flugelhorn for about a semester, off and on, because they had one.
Yeah, it was super cool. So I really, and in fact, I by my junior year, so the Milwaukee Youth Symphony required that you play in your local high school orchestra.
Okay.
Because they didn't want to be seen as taking people, as like stripping people out of a public school program because the youth symphony was so much better.
Right.
But I was like, well, can't I just play in the band? No.
Yeah. No, you had to. Yeah.
You could not do that. So I mean, so then I learned to play the trumpet and the French horn.
Yep, because I had a trumpet, because I switched over to trumpet, but you had already learned the trombone and the French horn. You were like, can I learn to play the French horn because it has the same clef, the same music?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think, like, I do wonder if I had just, been able to stick it out with the French horn, if that would have
turned into a professional music career.
Yeah. Though I'm, for many reasons, so grateful not to have that.
Well, and then there's, of course, the story of you trying to join the Army marching band, but then you played the banjo in a klezmer band, but that was years later. I thought you played the banjo. Oh,
I played the electric bass.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was funny. I ran into some people I was acquainted with, and one of them played in this klezmer band, and I said, hey, if you guys ever need a backup violinist. Now, what you must know is that they're like, I could never have played as their violinist was phenomenal.
Oh, really?
She's a professional. She's
okay.
But it was a way, and Judith, who's now a very good friend of mine, said, we don't need a violinist, we need a bass player. And I said, well, I can play the bass.
Yep.
if I get one and learn how.
Right.
And so it was really funny because then Judith Eisner, the head of the band, called me that Monday and she's like, I hear you play the bass. And I was like, well, yeah, I'm super busy for the next 3-4 weeks getting and learning to play the bass. But anyone who's listened to klezmer music, you're like, boom, boom, boom. I mean, this is not complicated. Right. So
this is one of my favorite things about our family is that we don't have imposter syndrome. We were raised to be imposters.
Right,
so
right.
I could probably figure out how to do that. It will be fine. I may not be the best you've ever seen.
On the other hand, they had no others. So
right. Yes, just teach me how to do it. It'll be fine. I may have to ask more than once. How do you do that?
It was very funny. She was super annoyed all the time because I'm like, no, I need the music. I'm not going to, but honestly, I think they let me stay in that band. I was in that band for a couple of years, but I think it was also because I had a station wagon, when you're in a band, that
is a valid,
you get cut a lot of slack if you have a station wagon.
In The Princess Bride, when they found the wheelbarrow, that was another tool that had not been mentioned. He was like, why didn't you mention the wheelbarrow?
Yeah.
Because that is also a value.
But I remember Jackie calling you after this one gig where we opened for Tina and the B-Sides at First Avenue.
Right.
Which was like the big main stage where prints made his name,
Yeah,
and
Husker Du's on the wall. I mean, it's
yeah,
fancy pants. Yeah.
Totally. We got paid $100, and there were 8 of us.
What?
Yeah. So I think it worked out to like 12 or $18, but it cost me $12 to park.
Right.
I did get a free beer out of it, and I thought, well, this is how alcoholism starts. Drink for free. That's a terrible idea.
Yep. How am I supposed to play?
Right.
Yep.
But here, but all I can think is, oh my gosh, you poor people in bands are never going to make a living.
Right. Well, that's the thing is that's when you think about people in bands, it's always, they're sleeping in a van, they're splitting a hotel room. I don't know how they stay together for as long as they stay together.
Right.
Because they're stacked on top of each other.
Too much togetherness.
Yeah. At least stand-up comics, you're alone.
Right.
You can be sad, you can be happy alone.
But I mean, it was a life skill that allowed me to open up for a band on, it was super fun. It was an all ages show, and we were I was much younger then, but like we were too old to be at an all ages show. But it was hilarious. So
so now let us take a lateral move and talk about you have 2 big trips that you took in high school, right? You took one to Scotland and one to Canada, didn't you?
I think the Canada was a student council thing.
Oh, was that? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And
so I think it was the summer before our senior year. We went to the International Festival of Youth Orchestras in Aberdeen, Scotland.
That's right.
And it was amazing, right? So first of all, like many advantages to playing the viola. The number one, when they announced that this trip was going to happen, I right away said I can't go.
Right. And thousands of dollars.
Cost money that we don't have.
Right.
And
I helped you sell pizzas.
Right. But that was the thing, is that I said, I'll do everything to support everyone, help, who wants to go, who can go.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Probably, I don't know, the second half of the school year, they called and said, well, what could you pay?
Yeah.
Right. Like, you got to pay something. What could you pay? And I think it was like 200. I think I had like $200.
Right.
And
wow.
I think Elliot and Nancy kicked in some small amount of money, and they were like, okay, well, you can go then, get a passport. Right.
Wow. Yeah.
So,
then you had to find $60 for a passport.
Right. But like the parents were sort of on board with some of the like smaller expenses. And, I mean, it was, but there were many other things in that whole experience of being in that orchestra that were, like every year we did this big sacred music concert that was like, one year we did a Catholic, like at a Catholic cathedral. We did the Ernest Bloch Sacred Service, which is a Jewish, it was actually one of my favorite pieces of music. At a synagogue in Chicago.
Okay.
And just again, like, I think for people whose parents, like I think about my kids and like mind-blowing opportunities that they have.
Yeah.
And like, but if your parents didn't go to college or, like it's just we had a very much smaller life that was made bigger by the opportunities that the orchestra provided for me.
Yep. That's cool. So now going to see orchestras, going to like pit orchestra stuff in musical theater, you did some of that, and I did some of that. That was just high school, but then you would go and see different symphonies, right?
Yeah.
And you still go to chamber orchestras, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I don't go as much as I wish I did because Sam doesn't enjoy the classical music. But so I think if I had known that people like you could be like the pit orchestra was something that was a career.
Yeah.
Like I think if I had known that, I would have been like, oh my gosh, I totally would do that. Like that's the most fun although, I just always remember Miss Kulagowski's telling the orchestra that we weren't in tune. And the singers were in tune. And I'm like, skeptical.
Right. Right. Because they don't have, there's no forks. There's nothing to spin on a person.
Also, the one of them, the 35 of us, all being out of tune together. So, but yeah, if I had known that, that would have been cool. I think, some of the, like, I'm fortunate to live in a place with a phenomenal symphony orchestra, the Minnesota Symphony.
Okay.
And before the pandemic, Sam and I went and saw Dessa with the Minnesota Orchestra, where she developed a.
Is that a musician, Dessa?
Yeah, she's a famous musician. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, just
I
always.
Why would you know that? Why would I know that? This is why we live with people who know things.
Exactly. I'm like famous, very famous.
Yeah, they also did like a Harry Potter, like showing Harry Potter, playing the Harry Potter music.
Right.
I think things like that make classical music really accessible. Like I remember in high school, I would sometimes take the bus downtown to see like the Chicago Symphony, and they would perform things that were totally inaccessible. And here's the thing, if you're like a 17, 16-year-old kid and you show up and you say, hey, is there an extra ticket? Yeah, they give you one. You don't have to.
You don't have. They're like, you're one
single
child,
teenager.
one single teenager for some reason wants to see a symphony orchestra. Please.
Yeah, pretty amenable.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that there's, it was so much of the old school was, this is like a very serious endeavor, which we must take very seriously, and
right.
Just don't have fun. Right. And I think that that's, been, just because of capitalism turned on its side. Right. Like we need people who want to come to this stuff, and it's boring, serious stuff. Nobody wants to do that.
Right. And so let's do the soundtrack to Star Wars or Jaws.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And you get kids to come, and, that's like one of the things I always like in the band, letting kids play with your instrument, letting, when kids would come over, when the kids were little and their friends would come over, and I had a little violin that I bought from China for her to just play with. And then the kids would want to play with my instrument. And I'm like, yeah, you should.
Yeah.
In fact, maybe that's the picture I'll get of you, of me with Judah.
The slug? Yeah.
Yeah. With little great. Kids all. So like, it's, it's made to feel so foreign, classical music. And then like Noah gets really mad at me when she's like, well, how do you know the tune of that like pop song already? And I'm like, because all music has been written, right? It's just, there's not that many notes. And we're just going to put them in a different order, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And we're going to give them a different beat, but all, but like in my head, it's all been written, right?
Right. So you can figure it out.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. So, yeah. Which is why you like playing with the radio.
Correct. Yeah. And also I feel like it forces you to listen to what you're doing and listen to, tone and all that. So.
Wow. So what are your favorite, are there favorite symphonies? Are there favorite arrangements? Are there favorite songs to play to? What do you got?
I love country music, so I play always to country music.
Oh, really?
So pathetic. I know.
That is terrible. Hilarious.
Yeah. I like Mary Chapin. I like the Chicks.
Okay. Yeah. So you're listening to Mary Chapin and the Chicks, and you're just playing along with them on your electric guitar?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Terrible. It's terrible. I feel bad for my neighbors, but they seem nice.
This is a safe space.
Right.
You get to dork out about your love of country music, and well, that's kind of fun. It's one time I went back to play with sort of in South Milwaukee. They had like the band had a reunion, but not really. They were going to play at something.
They got that Heritage Day parade or something.
Yeah.
Right?
And so I go because Paul Burridge and Stefan Zagrowitz are going to play in the drums. And so they let me have trumpet, and I sat next to oh, what the hell was her name? Anyway, she was first or second chair. She was really good at it. And all of a sudden they started playing the cadence from marching band. And I cried. I laughed and cried because it was all that muscle memory and all that weird, because that's what music will do for you, right? That'll just it'll make you all remember that stuff. So it's interesting. What would you say, like people who have kids? You would say just buy toy instruments and let them noodle around with them?
Well, when they're really little, like when they're toddlers, unless, like I have a colleague whose son, when he was like 2, walked up to a piano and could play
stuff
like
from ear.
Yeah, like when your kids are little and you sing them like lullabies and stuff.
Yeah.
And the kid like plunked on the piano and then immediately he figured out how to play
his favorite lullaby.
Yeah. I mean, he seriously was like 2 years old. And I the subject came up because I was looking to buy a piano, and my colleague said, "Oh, you should talk to Nancy at this piano place." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. Do you have a piano?" And he's like, "Yeah, my son plays piano." And I'm like, "Oh, really? Cool. Is he? What's the story?" And he said, "Oh, he's a freshman at Juilliard."
Oh, wow.
And I said, "Oh, so he's like one of the top 5 piano players in the world." And Dan said, "Yeah, most people don't understand that." And I'm like,
yeah,
I get that. I totally get that. So, I mean, I think the thing is with kids is listen to music, like wherever you live. If you live in a decent sized city, like even a small, like St. Paul Chamber Orchestra does kids programming, right? Or like Yo-Yo Ma is on Sesame Street all the time.
Yeah.
But like expose your kids. But I think my kids, I've never pushed them to practice. And I don't know if that's smart or not.
Yeah.
But during the pandemic, my daughter taught herself to play the guitar.
Okay.
And she plays guitar almost every day on her own.
Right.
Like through a guitar app that she put on her iPhone. And
okay.
And they both take singing lessons, and
that's neat.
Yeah, and Noah sings in the choir at school, and Judah can't wait to get to high school and sing in the choir. So
okay. Yeah. Okay.
Which, of course, those kids were the dorks. So I'm trying to be supportive, because I'm like, are you going to get beat up for your lunch money?
Right. Andy was in choir. My fella.
Need I say more?
He is a dork, and he owns it.
That's right. It's right. I know. That's just the little group of high schoolers call themselves the nerd herd. So,
right. And I mean, right. It has been co-opted into the world. The people have sort of like, everybody loves Star Wars now, right? Everybody loves Firefly and
also they're like billionaires too. So
right there.
But I think the other thing is that like there's so much emphasis with kids, like that they are going, that they have to be like elite, right?
Right. Everybody has to be the best. Yeah.
Like my kid's on a no-cut swim team. They don't cut anyone, right? It should be that way. But if you play soccer or football or any of the high school sports, if you haven't been playing since you were 3, you can't.
It's hard to measure
right?
up. Yeah. Because you don't have the skills. Yeah.
Well, or that they don't allow you to be bad, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because if you haven't been practicing since you were 3, you haven't had that.
Right.
You don't have the muscle memory.
You have a high school of 2,000 kids and there's only 40 kids on the soccer team. Right. Well, that's just stupid, right? None of those 40 kids, by the way, are going to be professional soccer players.
Right.
So what difference does it make if you have 40 or 60?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
everyone who wants to play soccer should get to play soccer or football or whatever. Yeah.
Like, and learn to appreciate music and learn to understand a little bit about it. Right. And like for me, learn to be tolerant of the music that the kids listen, that the young people listen to.
The kids today and their hip hop. And
so I don't have hip hoppers. I have pretty much pop poppers. So
right. Oh, the the sort of more the dance
No, they just like, like,
Taylor Swift or
yes, I wouldn't know who any of the people are. So.
right. And by the way, Jackie, Taylor Swift is 40. Anyway, so
Probably. They like Taylor Swift.
Okay, fair enough.
We went and saw.
How old is Taylor Swift? Now I need to know. Go ahead.
We went and what is this? What was the concert we went and saw recently? She just did a.
Oh, Taylor Swift is 32. Okay. So she is actually just out of her 20s. So it's fine. She gets to still be a relevant pop icon.
Oh, that's a relief.
Yeah. Who do you didn't you go see like Ed Sheeran or something?
I mean, I hate to even mention it because I bought tickets to Ed Sheeran.
Right.
And we ended up having to go to a wedding that weekend. No, we went and saw that it'll come to me after this show.
Right. You went and saw something and it was super fun. So you saw live so you see live music with the kids.
Yeah, and I would see almost anything. Like that's the thing is like when I lived in New York, a bunch of friends of mine were going to like some heavy metal thing. And they're like, oh, but you wouldn't want to go. And I'm like, oh, I absolutely would want to go. Right.
Wow.
Like, all right. Why not? I mean, are there earplugs? Is it going to,
Right. Could you hear it through the with some sort of buffer?
30 years later, I'm still shaking from it. So, yeah, no, I would go see anything.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
I like.
You can always leave.
Right. If you don't like it.
It's not servitude, right? You didn't buy a ticket and you're not. Although I will say, we went and saw something recently that was not good. And I dropped Sam and the kids off and they sat too close.
Oh, it's hard to leave. It's hard to leave if you're too close because you feel self-conscious. Though right, I will
you don't want to make the artist feel bad. It's like if you ordered a dish that just wasn't to your liking, but was prepared properly.
You suck
this
it
was
up.
Music not to my liking.
But they were doing it right.
But they were doing it right, so then I felt bad, but we did leave. So,
well, I have to say that Andy once took me early dating. So we didn't know how to leave. We went with his friends, Aaron and Kirsten. And it was performance art.
Oh, yeah.
And the main two characters were nude, wrapped in saran wrap. And they had Benoit balls or like metal balls up them. And he picked her up and she dropped it into like a bird bath. And it was genuinely one of the weirdest things I've ever sat through in my life. The gutsiest people, because it was a theater in the round. So you had to walk through the cast to leave. But the gutsiest people was an older couple probably in their middle to late 60s who genuinely 25 minutes in got up and left. And I was like, yeah, they knew that they had to go. They couldn't stick it out.
It reminds me of the multi-generational Korean family who went to see Margaret Cho. We were sitting like 8 or 10 seats from them. And I turned to Rima and I said, this is not going to end well for them.
Oh, right, because they were too close, but there were 8 of them.
I don't think they knew what they were getting themselves into.
Sometimes people are just psyched because I get a lot of people who come and they're like, we saw that you're Armenian. And I said, all of the jokes about my dad can be turned into Armenian jokes, maybe. Possibly. Yes. But then that seems a sweeping generalization.
Yeah. It was Brandi Carlile that we went and saw.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Nice. What was the first concert you ever saw? Was it an orchestra?
It was Jean Leponte.
Jean Leponte, which I do not know who that is.
He's a French guy who plays electric violin.
Oh.
Like sort of jazz. Yeah, I mean, I went and saw like the Milwaukee Symphony and the Chicago Symphony and things like that. But that was the first
Is it
spent $10 buying a ticket to go see some.
Fair enough. Is the electric violin the one that's essentially just the neck?
Depends. They're all different. I mean, I've seen everything that looks like a
normal.
You can do a pickup on a wood one to like super modern.
Right.
Yeah.
So, do you have a favorite instrument in the past 30 odd years that you like that when did you pick up the electric guitar? When did you get that electric guitar? Because
some
that's the one
friends-
you're noodling
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, some friends were getting rid of they were renovating their house, and so they had it, their daughter played it and they offered it. And so
Andy has an acoustic guitar that he's going to bring to supposedly to Guitar Center to get rid of. And I don't know
we
when
have an
that's going to
acoustic
happen.
guitar as well.
Okay.
And that's what Noah plays. Yeah, I mean, in my home office, like at the beginning of the pandemic, I rented a cello for a while. My hands aren't big enough.
Well,
So,
we are a small-handed people.
correct. So
We also, Darla and I both have very small penises because of our hand size.
mine's
Anyway.
almost invisible. As it
Mine's
turns
an
out.
innie.
Okay,
So
so you went straight to like an explicit rating now, right?
I for some reason I had to insert a dick joke for some reason. You guys,
fair enough.
I just said insert. Okay, so ridiculous. Well, we have about 10 more minutes. Is there anything you would like to say about orchestras, instruments that we have not covered? Because we can also just wrap it up because I'm psyched you were able to do this last minute.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I've never understood people like Sam will never listen to this, so I can grump a bit. But I've never understood people who say, well, I don't ever want to listen to a certain kind of music, right? Like I'm never going to go to like a 50 Cent concert, except unless somebody gave me a ticket.
If it were free, you would go.
And then 100 times I'd go, right? Because I'd be like, well, that's interesting, right?
Right.
And again, you're not locked in forever. You can go, you enjoy. Right?
What about seating? See, that's the thing is I would go to any concert if there were seating.
Oh, yeah. I don't care for like the whole
I don't want to stand.
mosh pity type thing. No.
Right. We went and saw Heart about a year and a half ago, and that was delightful.
Yeah.
And yeah.
But like, who's the other? Like, one of these sort of like feminist icons. I can't think of her name, but like
Susan B. Anthony.
Sure.
And, sure. It was Susan B. Anthony.
Like the concert was at like the State Theater downtown. The tickets, I think, were $110 a piece. It costs like $40 to park nearby.
Right.
To listen to someone lecture us about the evils of capitalism.
Sure.
And I thought, well, this is awesome.
Right. Thank you, Joni.
Can I get a t-shirt?
Right. For $60 as well.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly.
It's the markup on the t-shirts is kind of ridiculous as well.
Well, would I go?
Amazing.
I would totally go. So I think some of the really fun things I've done, which I like Noah wanted to go to Lilith Fair. Is that
okay? Yeah, that's one of the ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, it turns out I'm glad she didn't, because there was, of course, some like
crime,
shooting or crimes or something.
Yeah.
But like stuff like that I really enjoyed, like big festival. When
I went to Lollapalooza once.
That's what it was in Chicago, Lollapalooza.
Okay. Yeah. I saw Jane's Addiction. Many of the bands that I've seen, it was a bit of a ripoff for others. The fact that, because I don't appreciate music, but I win. I saw Miles Davis once by accident.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
It was in Provincetown. He was playing at the not the courthouse, but the town hall.
Yeah.
And Jenny Bergman had an extra ticket. And he asked a woman in the front row if she had dental floss. He said, this will go better if anyone has some dental floss. And a woman in the front row had dental floss in her purse.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
He had something stuck.
Yeah. And he had, for his embouchure, he just needed to fix it up.
I love it. Yeah. I think those kinds of things, I would totally go see almost anybody. Right.
Right.
Like,
it sounds like it. It sounds like you were like, but would it be fun to go see Mary Chapin or the Chicks?
Oh, I've seen them both. Yes.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, I think one of the things is like, it's hard post-pandemic, which is not over.
No, like post-lockdown. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like to think about sitting in a confined space like that.
With
right?
thousands of people. Yeah. To go to an indoor concert would be weird.
Yeah. So we tried in Denver a few weeks ago to go see something at Red Rocks.
Yeah.
But it was like I draw the line here. It was some Christian rock band.
Right. Well, yeah, you don't need to be preached at.
Right.
That-
No.
and
So,
yes, but
and
what
like
about you?
last
Should
night-
come to LA and come to the Hollywood Bowl. Those
I
are
have been
fun.
to the Hollywood Bowl. Do you know that?
I did not know that. What did
But
you
I
see
went
at
to see a movie.
There was a movie at the Hollywood Bowl. Of
It was
course
the
there
weirdest
was.
thing. Yeah.
What was it?
It was some like gay film festival thing.
Oh, okay. All right.
So, but I would love to go see it. And like Ravinia in Chicago, I would love to do that. And the place in Wisconsin where some people died in a plane crash.
There's like a rolling hills of some sort.
Yeah,
It's called
yeah, I
it's
would
called
to
like
do
that. Yeah, it's a green. I think the word green is
I
involved.
think you're right.
It's
But not
music is my
technical.
life, Rangers. So
Well, and names, I cannot offer any help with the names.
right. But I remember we played one of my favorite symphonies we played in band was a Dvorak symphony.
Yeah.
And it was super interesting to play. And granted, bass clarinet is all 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 13, 2, 3, 4, pop, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, that kind of thing. But yeah, but I did like Dvorak a great deal. And I do kind of, what? And one of my favorite things is like the soundtrack to Bridgerton. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah. I love that music. I love that music.
They take pop tunes and they give it to a quartet.
Yeah, it's lovely. And I just think it sounds cool. And I would love to play that music. Right.
Yeah.
And so periodically I have an acquaintance who plays a viola in like a community orchestra, and she's constantly on me. But I'm like, to do it right, to do it well, you got to practice every day. And I don't know.
It's just another thing. Yeah.
Spelling bees getting in the way or something. I don't know what.
Right.
Candy Crush. So
yeah, you never know.
Anyway. Maybe when the kids are grown up.
Yeah. So. Darla-KASHIAN or Darla-KASHIAN. Let me just tell you that it has been a delight to talk to my own sister, as it always is. We talk most days, but this we recorded. Right. You did the Dork Forest. We talked about music. We talked about orchestra. We talked about. Is there anything you want to plug? Not particularly. I can't imagine. I mean, if people need a socially responsible financial advisor and have millions of dollars, you should probably figure out how to find her.
Yeah, if you're in Minneapolis and or St. Paul and want to come see Tim Miller, MSNBC correspondent, who's going to be.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm going to be interviewing him on September 12th.
Oh my gosh. You do have something to plug.
I do.
That's right. It's an author date.
Right.
Okay, I will put that in the
show notes.
Yeah, in the show notes. Darla's gonna moderate a Tim Miller author thing, and that will be in St. Paul, Minnesota in September. What's the date again?
September 12th at the Lost Fox,
which is a bookstore, right?
Nope, it's a cafe and restaurant.
Okay.
So there will be beer and wine and coffee. And Subtext is selling books, and it's gonna be fun. I'm putting on a book reading, so go figure.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for doing this show. And Rangers, you know the rules out there. Take care of each other.
My hat, my hat, my hat. They're dancing around my hat, my hat, my hat, my hat. Well, what do you think of that? If it looks like a Mexican hat dance and it sounds like a Mexican hat dance, it's most likely a Mexican hat dance. So take off your hat and let's dance.
Yay! Oh my God. Why don't we just call that as the end of the show?